Infrastructure in India by Varun, Chhabra, and Chien. As we all know, India is a rising country that has been growing at an unprecedented rate. In the introduction to this unit, we learned that since India grew so fast, it jumped straight from most people having no cell phones, skipping landlines altogether. This can be attributed to their lack of infrastructure because it would take way too much for India to install the infrastructure needed for these landlines. This is just one example of the infrastructure problems which affect 6 main categories: roads, ways, ports, housing, power, and aviation. In Mumbai, thanks to all of the modernization and expansion, there's a high demand for not only more houses since more people can afford to have houses, but bigger houses because people are making so much more money. High demand and the ability to meet it, the housing market is having a problem because of a lack of infrastructure. Shankar Mitra, a head of strategic consulting company, said that infrastructure is not adequate. This pushes up costs for developers and makes the project unviable. What he means by this is due to the lack of infrastructure, many houses aren't selling as well and are not worth selling. This is because in some areas there aren't any schools, markets, hospitals, or restaurants. In addition, the closest railways for some places would be 10 kilometers away, making that house very inconvenient and hard to live in. The situation in Mumbai demonstrates a lack of social infrastructure in general, but also highlights a bigger issue: a weak government unable to control and set up projects to build infrastructure in the first place.
The lack of proper power lines and grids in India has led to huge problems with electricity and power, most notably seen in blackouts. In August of 2012, there were enormous blackouts in northern and eastern India, including its capital New Delhi, affecting over 600 million people. The cause of the blackout was vaguely determined to be an overload of the national power grid network, which in turn caused the regional grids to disconnect. As you can see here, the power grids are absolutely terrible, and there are major improvements that can be made. As a result of these blackouts, India's entire system of infrastructure was hurt, as trains and other transportation stopped working, offices and workplaces closed, and even hospitals and sanitation plants had to rely on backup power. This highlights the terrible infrastructure that is in India right now. These events are crippling for a rising economic power like India, and they hurt the country's efforts to catch up to its rival nation, China. In contrast to India, China has a solid infrastructure system. As seen in this stretch of highway, China has a very organized system of roads and transportation unlike India, giving it a huge advantage in the long term and allowing it to remain heads and shoulders above Indian country. Although India has made leaps and bounds economically, its infrastructure is still greatly undeveloped and ineffective, primarily a result of a corrupt and weak government. Unlike China with its authoritarian rule, India is a democracy, which makes it much more difficult to embark on major spending projects such as new infrastructure. While difficult, this is a problem that must be fixed. As long as India's infrastructure stays crippled, the country will never be able to achieve sustainable growth and fully establish itself as an economic powerhouse.